Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Everybody who has joined us, we're probably going to have other people hopping on. That's perfectly okay. Welcome to Illuminating Solutions to Caregiver Burnout, a program brought to you by the Caregiver Coalition of Northeast Florida, which is under ElderSource. Thank you for joining us. We have a wonderful program today with a couple of phenomenal speakers, as well as a caregiver panel, which I'm excited about, and an opportunity for an open Q&A on the end. I'll go over how to do that in a moment, but just welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Rachel Weinstein, and I'm the coordinator of the Caregiver Coalition. I also do community outreach for ElderSource. So thank you again for joining us, and let's begin. Next slide, please. Some housekeeping items. This session is being recorded to be posted to our website for those who could not attend. Please type questions into the chat box. Questions will be answered once we reach the Q&A session. Due to the number of attendees, we may run into technical difficulties. Once the seminar concludes, there are going to be 3 simple survey questions that will appear on your screen if you're joining us live. Please help us know how we did and what topic you'd like to see us address in the future by quickly answering those questions that will pop up after the session concludes. Thank you. Next slide, please. Activating closed captioning. Once the host enables live transcript, you should see the live captions come across the bottom of your screen. If you do not see the captions or you wish to hide captions, select More at the bottom of this Zoom screen, click Show Subtitles or Hide Subtitles. If you want to adjust the size of the captions, select More at the bottom of the Zoom screen and click Subtitle Settings. To view the full transcript, click View Full Transcript. This option will display the full transcript off to the right as it is happening live. Thank you. A little bit about the Caregiver Coalition in Northeast Florida. Our mission is to collectively elevate caregiving and improve the quality of life for caregivers in Northeast Florida. Our vision is to have Northeast Florida be a place where all caregivers have the knowledge of and access to resources that support the caregiver and those in their care. Our first speaker, let me please introduce, next slide, please. Abigail Costley, who has her BSW. She is a care connector for ElderSource. Abby started her career working with older adults in the assisted living sector. She began her journey with ElderSource being a social work intern in 2021, after which she was hired by ElderSource as a full-time care connector. She's currently in her last semester at University of North Florida as a full-time student working toward her Master's of Social Work. As a care connector with ElderSource, she focuses on all internal caregiver support programs that ElderSource offers. Okay. So without further ado, Abby, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Rachel, for that great introduction. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about caregiver burnout, as well as the programs that we offer here internally for caregivers at ElderSource. So we can go to the next slide. So first, we're going to start with the simple, what is caregiver burnout? So if you're a caregiver yourself, you may have felt some of these signs before, which is caregiver burnout is just a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion. And it's to the point of burnout when you get to a point where both of you and the person that you're caring for may suffer from this burnout. Next slide. So here's just a little fact sheet that I think really just pinpoints what we call silent helpers, the family caregivers. I think one thing I really want to point out is that 1 in 6 Americans are caring for an adult with an illness or a disability. So that can tell you that even when times you feel like you're the only one going through this, there are others out there, and I think that's a very important part of your caregiving journey. And then, of course, we have at the bottom, one thing I think is very interesting is that majority of caregivers already work a full-time job and is already spending a majority of their time caring for their loved one as well. And that just shows how much dedication you all have as caregivers. To the next slide. And here's some other just general facts that I really wanted to point out to show the importance of caregiver burnout and caregivers in general. So in just the past 5 years, over 40 million caregivers provided 37 billion hours of cares for loved ones. And then about 85% of those caregivers in the US did not receive any respite. Now, respite, if just in case you don't know, is when you're able to get a break. So whether that be your loved one goes into a facility, or it may be in-home respite where you have a professional caregiver come and take care of your loved one while you can leave the home and take care of yourself. And then the next one is depression affects over 40% of all caregivers. And that is something we actually screen for in one of our programs that I'll talk about later on. And then lastly, those who are responsible for helping someone with Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or any debilitating illness are also at high risk of developing their own medical issues. And that again has to do with caregivers not focusing on their self as much because they're caring for someone else in the meantime. Go to the next slide. So some causes, I'm just going to do some brief causes of caregiver burnout. One could be just the expectation of yourself. So whether it be, let's say you're caring for your mom and your mom obviously took care of you growing up. And so you bring on this burden of, I need to take care of her like she took care of me. And you hold yourself to those high standards. And then we have expectations from others. Expectations for others, for example, could be let's go back to the caring for your mother again. And you have siblings and other friends that just expect you to take care of her because let's say you're the oldest sibling. That's your job. You're supposed to take all the responsibility. And that's a lot for one person to just carry on their own. So you have the expectation of, I need to be a good caregiver. And then you have the expectation of, this is what people want from me and expect me to do, and I can't let them down. So that's some really hard-earning causes of burnout. And then we also have what is called identity discrepancy. Now, to tell you what identity discrepancy is, it's this change of relationships. So let's say you are caring for your husband. You're changing your relationship from I'm just a wife to I'm a wife and now I'm also a caregiver. And that change in relationship is very difficult. It is not knowing how to get back to the ways you used to be, and you're losing that sense of a close bond. And then also just taking on this new role is already difficult enough, and how to approach that change in your relationship with your loved one. Go to the next slide. So of course we just have a few, I have a few, but we'll have more discussed later on as well of how you can take care of you. Of course, it's take regular breaks. I know that this almost seems impossible, but I say, this, even if it's 5 minutes, like taking a shower and being by yourself, that's a break because it can reset you more than you could ever know. If you could get away for a day, that's even better. But we can take all the little breaks we can. That can help more than you could ever think. And then, of course, nourish your mental and physical health, whether that be, let's say you really enjoy going outside and just enjoying the scenery, maybe go for a walk. That's nourishing your mental and your physical because you're just taking in the beauty of the outdoors while also getting some physical activity. Or whether it be go to the doctors, say, hey, look, friend, I really need you to watch my mom while I go to this doctor. I have not been feeling well. And then that goes again with staying socially connected. Don't be afraid to reach out for help. You already have so much responsibilities on your own. Having that friend group or a caregiver, other caregivers, like a caregiver support group, or even family. Just having those around you can help and brighten your spirits and make you feel like, again, you're not in this alone. And then lastly, ask for and accept help. I know as caregivers, many times we just want to say, oh, I can do this by myself. I'm strong. And I know you all are strong if you're a caregiver. But sometimes you have to wave the white flag and be like, look, I need help. And if someone's willing to help, you need to accept it. You know, if someone says, hey, I can bring you some dinner this week, instead of saying, let's say you don't want to eat their cooking, that's fine. Just say, you know, instead of dinner, why don't you just come over and hang out with us for an hour? Accept this help because you will need it to keep you going so we don't get to that point of burnout. And let's go to the next slide. So now I'm going to talk about just the programs that are available through ElderSource for caregivers, and that you can connect with me to get in touch and learn more about these, but I will go over them now. So we can go to the next slide. So first we have the virtual support group. This virtual support group is where you can share information, ask questions, share personal stories, anything the caregiver wants to share, you are more than welcome to. And this is a good way for caregivers to connect, you know, face to face in real time while using Zoom, because we know it can be very difficult to leave the home. Since you're a caregiver, we do it over Zoom. And all you would really need is just a laptop, a phone, iPad, whatever you have with a camera. These sessions usually last an hour. Sometimes they go a little over, but I think one really positive aspect, which you may hear from caregivers later on, is that it makes you have this sense of community and that you're like, I'm not in this alone. And also it's great. You just get great advice. And if you want to be a part of this virtual support group, I do it twice a week, Wednesdays at 1, and then Thursdays at 6 p.m. And those take place on Zoom as well. And if you want to join, I'll have my email at the end of the slide, and you could just email me, say, you know, I'm interested. You're not held to any type of attendance, just whenever you can come, or if you need advice, you're definitely more than welcome to join. The only requirement is that you're a caregiver. So let's go to the next one. So now we have what is called Powerful Tools for Caregivers. It's a 6-week class, and it's designed to help caregivers take better care of themselves while caring for a friend or a relative. Now, this is a free program, and it's to help you be the best caregiver that you can be. And these 6 classes are held once a week, and we have 2 class leaders, and these classes also take place online, and that is because we cover 7 counties in Florida, and we want to make it as accessible as possible. And again, this is free. You're given a book. Once you attend the first class, you get a nice big book. And some of the topics we cover, for example, is self-care, different communication styles. And we also talk about making those hard decisions, how to communicate with those hard decisions, because that's also something that can be very difficult. And we also talk about guilt. And that's one topic I think a lot of caregivers may struggle with. So I think this is a really great opportunity if you're looking to learn more about communicating as a caregiver. And once again, it's free, so take advantage of it while you can. So let's go to the next program here. So what we have now is our Caregiver Burnout Prevention Program, and it's called T-Care. This is an assessment and referral program, and it's designed to support family caregivers that are at risk of burnout. Caregivers are interviewed through an assessment to identify any stressors, and we also screen for depression and may talk about feelings that arise when caregiving. And then a care plan is created to help them address the root causes of burnout. So we could do, for example, let's say you're really struggling with that identity discrepancy. And maybe, you're just like, I'm not in a happy place right now. Through one of our funders, we're actually able to pay for 8 sessions of mental health counseling. And that is so helpful to have a neutral party that you can talk to and really get some coping strategies. They're just really great to help caregivers. And another great way too is maybe you just need help navigating resources. As I'm sure you all know, resources and services can be really hard to navigate and know what to do. That's when you would come to me or my other coworkers and say, look, I don't know what to do. And that's where we come in. We can help you. We can help you get through this caregiving journey and just make it a lot easier on you, because as caregivers, sometimes you don't get a lot of help. And that's what we want to do with this program. And again, all these programs are completely free. So please take advantage of them while they're free, because you don't know when there'll be other free programs in your area, because it's very hard to find. And again, as you can see at the bottom, the only requirements for this program is that you're a caregiver of someone that is 60 years or older, and the care receiver must live in Baker, Clay, Duval, Flagler, St. John's, Nassau, or Volusia County. Now, you can live as a caregiver, you can live somewhere else, but the care receiver has to live in those 7 counties. But for the only program that does not have strict requirements, again, is the support group. Only thing you need is to be a caregiver. So I want to thank you all for letting me share. And again, we should have a slide. I believe, is it the next slide? No. So there's a slide at the end, I believe, with our contacts, and it'll have our email. Please reach out to me and we can get you started on these programs.
Thank you so much, Abby. We've got some good questions to pose at the end during our Q&A portion. And yes, I do have that contact information at the very end. So thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I want to acknowledge our Andrea Spencer with ElderSource. She's our VP of Communications, and she's in the background typing some things to folks who posed questions in the chat box and just helping to keep things smoothly running. Thank you, Andrea, and Jessica Del Rio, who is running technical assistance and forwarding our slides. She's with ElderSource as well, and I thank you both for helping this event today. So our next speaker. Next slide, please. So Shenda Stevens, CCRP, CDP, CSM. She is the program director for the State of Florida Department of Elder Affairs Designated Memory Disorder Clinic, also known as MDC. She's the program manager for the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville. She has 11 years of experience at Mayo Clinic, 8 of those years with the MDC and the ADRC, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Experience ranging from clinical trial coordination, community outreach and engagement, support group facilitation, and dementia education and counseling. She's a certified Alzheimer's disease and related disorders training provider, a certified dementia practitioner, and a certified clinical research professional. Thank you so much for joining us, Shenda. Next slide, please. Okay, so Shenda, I'm going to give it to you to take it away, and let's see. Yep, we're good to go.
Thank you, Rachel, for that warm intro. Good morning, everybody. I'm here today to speak to you about caregiver stress and the ways that we can manage this stress. So as Abigail mentioned earlier, as a caregiver, you're so focused on making sure that the needs of your loved ones are met that you often neglect your own. So you might even feel guilty for wanting the self-care when here's your loved one who clearly needs that, care more than you do. But like when you're on an airplane and they go over those pre-takeoff instructions and they tell you, you must put on your own oxygen mask first before you assist others. And the same really does apply to caregivers. You can't pour from an empty cup. So you really need to take care of your own needs, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally, in order to be an effective caregiver. Next slide, please. So as a caregiver, when you don't prioritize your health and well-being, then you'll surely start to feel the burnout. And what is the most common cause of burnout? It would be stress. Next slide, please. So here we have the definition of stress. It's a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. And stress can come from any event or thought that makes you feel frustrated, angry, or nervous. It's your body's reaction to a challenge or demand. Next slide, please. So according to a research conducted by Mayo Clinic, the following are some risk factors for developing caregiver stress. It can range from having fewer years of formal education, living with the person you're caring for, which leads to you feeling like you can't escape because they're there with you all the time. You know, when they're calling out your name, you have to be there. Some other risk factors are social isolation, having depression, financial difficulties. It can be also a lack of choice in being a caregiver, because sometimes it's really out of your control and you're all that your loved one has. It could also be a cultural perspective, and I can give an example here. In my culture, it's expected that those in the younger generation take care of the older generation. So my mother is the youngest of her mother's she's been living with my medical, needs, but that's expected. So what I've tried to do is alleviate some of that burden from my mom and assist her with it. So, these risk factors, sometimes you can't avoid being a caregiver. Next slide, please. And when your body feels stress, its natural reaction is to go into that fight or flight response mode. So what does that feel like? And you may feel any or all of the following. And it can be increase in your blood pressure, your heart rate. It starts to beat really fast. You start breathing really fast, or you feel like you can't catch your breath. You have butterflies in your stomach. That nervous feeling that you get. Your hearing become more sensitive and acute, and perhaps even changes in your appetite. Some people lose weight when they are stressed, and some may find comfort in food, and so they stress eat. So these are just some of the natural reactions that your body goes through when you are experiencing stress. Next slide, please. But in addition to just the physical effects, stress can do a number on your mind, your emotions, and your behaviors as well. So for example, it can affect how, you're thinking, impaired judgment, again, depression, apathy, or perhaps it's more of behavioral. You're smoking, or you pick up smoking, or you smoke more, or maybe you've picked up drinking, or you're drinking more. And in addition to that, it may cause fatigue, muscular twitches, all of the following that you see here on this slide. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the impact that stress can have on your mind and your body, but how can you identify when you're experiencing the stress? You'll know it. So here are some common signs and symptoms of stress to watch out for. And you don't need to have all of these signs to consider yourself stressed. Sometimes it just takes experiencing one of these symptoms chronically. So for example, mood changes, and we went over, depression, irritability, anxiety, sleep disturbances. Maybe you become a light sleeper because you have to be more in tune with your loved ones when they need you. They're calling out to you in the night. Perhaps it's trouble concentrating or developing negative coping strategies. Again, the smoking, the drinking, excessive shopping or eating. Next slide, please. Or perhaps, physical symptoms such as headaches or upset stomach. Stress can also cause you to develop new health issues or increase the severity of your current ones, primarily cardiovascular disease like heart disease or high blood pressure, which we mentioned earlier. as symptoms that can occur, or even psychological disorders like depression. So depression, anxiety, stress are the most prevalent symptoms of caregiver burnout. Next slide, please. So as Abby mentioned earlier, burnout is the accumulation of unchecked and built up stress over a long period of time. But if you leave it untreated or not addressed because you don't have time for it and it's on the back burner, stress can develop into chronic stress, and eventually it crosses over into that burnout territory. So the strategies for caregiver stress management are similar, and they go hand in hand with the strategies for preventing burnout that Abby also went over earlier. So accepting help, focusing on what you are able to do. So sometimes it's normal to feel guilty that you're not a perfect caregiver. You're doing the best that you can. You're giving it your all. Also setting realistic goals for yourself, break those larger tasks into smaller steps that you can do one at a time, making lists, prioritizing, begin to say no when those requests can become draining. A lot of times, we're yes people because we want to do it and we want to help, but we also need to know our own limitations. Getting connected. So finding out about caregiver resources like Elder Source or the Memory Disorder Clinic. Many communities have classes that are specifically designed about the diseases that your loved one is facing. So here at the Alzheimer's Center and also the Memory Disorder Clinic, we focus on individuals and caregivers who are caring with someone with an Alzheimer's disease or related disorder. Join a support group. Abby mentioned the support group earlier. At the MDC and ADRC, we have our own virtual support group that helps caregivers of individuals with Alzheimer's or a memory problem. We actually have 4 sessions offered monthly. And of course, at the end of the presentation, I'll be able to provide more information on if you are a caregiver of someone with dementia, how you can join our sessions. We have one that is related to and specific for caregivers of individuals with frontal temporal dementia. We have one that is specific to caregivers of someone with Lewy body dementia. And then we have an all-comers session where anyone who is a caregiver of someone with dementia, any form of dementia, can join us. Next slide, please. And to continue on strategies for caregivers and stress management, setting personal health goals. For example, setting a good sleep routine, finding time to stay physically active, eating healthy diets, practicing mindfulness, meditation, or breathing. And most importantly, and I say this is most important, is seeking social support from friends and family. You don't want to self-isolate yourself. Don't feel sorry for yourself. A lot of people are going through the same things you are. And sometimes all you need to do is ask for help, and there will be people willing to help you. Because you always have to remember, the mightier your team that you have behind you, the stronger you become, and the stronger you become for your loved one. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so we mentioned practicing mindfulness, meditation, and breathing as strategies for managing caregiver stress. So breathing exercises can reduce stress by increasing oxygen exchange, which reduces your blood pressure, slows that heart rate, and releases any tension held in your abdomen. So remember earlier the fight or flight mode, where all of these things that I just mentioned, that's part of the fight or flight mode. So breathing exercises can help you relax because it makes your body feel like it does when you're already relaxed. So deep breathing is one of the best ways to lower stress in the body, because when you breathe in deeply, it sends a message to your brain, hey, let's calm down a little bit. So now I'd like to give it a try. Although I can't see you in the audience, I'm imagining that we're in a very serene room together and we're doing these exercises together. Okay, so next slide, please. So the first breathing exercise I'd like for us to do together, and if you're in a room, please join me. It's called box breathing or square breathing. So as you can see there, as indicated in the graphic, it's in a square. So I'm going to read you the exercise and instructions first, and then we'll try to do them together, okay? Because it's hard to kind of say the instructions and try to hold my breath at the same time. So for this exercise, it's done while you're sitting up straight, and then you breathe in for 4 seconds, or at least to a count of 4. And then you hold your breath for 4 seconds or to a count of 4. And then you breathe out for 4 seconds. And then you hold your breath for 4 seconds. And you repeat this until your heart rate starts to slow down and your breathing starts to slow down as well. So I'll try to do this while I'm, reading the instructions again. Okay, so you breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. Breathe out for 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 4 seconds. And then you repeat that. It's quite hard to do the exercise while I'm also talking, because I don't know, you have to be a magician to do that. But that certainly does help with regulating your heart rate and also your breathing. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so this one, the second breathing exercise, it's called the 4-7-8 breathing. It's a little bit harder, more difficult than the first one, because you do have to hold your breath or exhale for a longer period of time. So if you are prone to losing your breath, or please don't do this exercise, because we don't want you to lose consciousness or pass out or anything. So, but this exercise can be done while you're laying down or you're sitting up, and it helps to de-stress, and it helps you to relax or go to sleep faster. So if you're someone who has trouble sleeping, perhaps this could be a breathing exercise that you can start practicing as part of your nightly routine. So I'm going to read it first to you, and then we'll try to do it together. So step 1, you're going to sit up straight, and then you're going to exhale completely through your mouth, making a whooshing sound, like a. And then when you're releasing, close your mouth and inhale quietly through the nose to a mental count of 4. So you close your mouth and inhale quietly. And then while you're inhaling for that 4 count, you hold your breath to a count of 7. So here's where that lengthiness comes in. And once you've gone to that count of 7, exhale completely through your mouth for a count of 8. So that's also lengthy, making sure that you have completely exhaled by the time you have reached 8. And then, of course, you repeat until you feel a slowed rate of breathing. For this one, I'm not even going to attempt it, because you're just going to see me struggle as I'm trying to read the instructions and do it at the same time. But I will also provide Rachel with the handouts for these breathing exercises that you all can do at home when you start to feel a little stress, when you start to feel your heart rate is increasing and your breathing is increasing, and you want to get it back down. But I also want to mention, it's a beautiful day out there. So I hope that you'll step outside, get some sunshine on your face, and breathe. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to take you on this deep breathing journey. And I hope that I've been able to provide you with some helpful information on caregiver stress management. And of course, if you do need resources from the Memory Disorder Clinic or the Alzheimer's Research Center, if you're interested in enrolling your loved ones or yourself into research, our contact information will be provided by Rachel at the end of this presentation. Please feel free to reach out. We will always reach back out to you with resources and information and services that we offer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sashenda. I so appreciate that informative presentation. And we've got some good questions to ask for you at the end that were submitted during your talk. So thank you so much. All right. So next slide, please. I would love to welcome our caregiver panelists, Jill, Jeanette, and Angie. We're going to have a little chat. I'm going to do a little Q&A with each of our caregivers who are going to be able to lend some real world experience and advice to everyone who's listening. So if the three of you could kindly activate your cameras, I can do it for you if you're having trouble. Okay. Let's see here, children. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies. And I am going to pose a question and then call on each of you to answer it. And then after that, we're going to have a general Q&A where we're going to read questions that were submitted to everyone who's spoken today. And of course, hang out for the end because I'm going to give you some important information from each of our speakers, how to reach out to them if you have a question, and where there's going to be a little survey at the end, a really quick one once you guys log off, if you're listening live, to make sure that we have some feedback from you that will help us give some, address some topics that you'd like to see in the future. So, caregiver panelists, Jill, I'm going to start with you. I want to ask you, Jill, what has been your biggest challenge as a caregiver?
I think the hardest thing for me was really finding time for myself and just truly enjoying those moments. Like, I did a lot with my mom, so it was hard for me to enjoy those things that we normally did together, and just going through what they call caregivers guilt of feeling happy or feeling like I'm enjoying the moment, knowing that my loved one can't share in those moments with me anymore. And
Right.
so I would always feel guilty about finding myself smiling and having a good time. So that really bothered me a lot. And I never had an opportunity to really enjoy being happy and being relaxed. And then also just finding the resources that I needed to make sure that I was providing the best possible care for my mom, because we often feel like we're not doing enough and just not understanding that some situations we cannot fix. And I think as caregivers, we try to fix it. And just realizing in that moment that we can't fix it. So the only thing we have to do is just love them and understand that this is something that we're going through in this moment, and we're going to make the best of this situation. So that was the hardest thing for me to deal with as being a caregiver.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jill. I'm going to circle back to you with our next question in a moment. So you've been caring for your mom.
Yes, caring for my mom. She had 2 strokes. And so the first time she was able to bounce back, and the second time, just some of the complications of not being able to be mobile as she wanted to caused health issues. And so,
Understood.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for what you've been doing for your mom. And thank you for being one of our panelists today. It's wonderful to hear from you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Jeanette, I'd love to ask you the same question. Tell us a little bit about who you've been caring for and what's been the most challenging for you as a caregiver.
Yes, I'm taking care of my husband, who will be 81 in a month. And I first started seeing signs that didn't make sense in 2013. Then in 2014, I started into the process of getting him medical help, and that's been our path. So it's been a long road. I would have to say that the hardest thing for me is to watch the decline. You see daily changes. It's a high and low. Sometimes you'll see something change, and then the next day they're back to normal. So it's this yo-yo situation that you're dealing with all the time. And it's really hard to stay positive during that, because what my emotion is reflected in Jim. So if I'm tense or upset, he's going to be tense or upset. So it's important to stay positive. And it's so hard when it's unpredictable what's going to be happening. So you're in this kind of walking on jello situation where you don't know what changes are going to be happening from time to time. And then as all of this is happening, my world shrinks because I don't have as much time to get out and do things or to have my own free time. So that's really the hardest thing. I call it the long goodbye. And it's
Yes.
very challenging.
Wow, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Jeanette. That is absolutely challenging. And you are a strong woman for spinning all of those plates, trying to manage your own mental health while caring for your husband. I really hear you. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to circle back with you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Angie, I would love to ask you the same question. Tell a little bit about who you're caring for and what's been the most challenging for you.
I'm caring for my husband, and he has with mixed dementia of Alzheimer's as well as Lewy bodies disease. Although I find that the Lewy bodies is definitely the more noticed symptoms with him in his case. I had a lot of this similar type things happen, as Jeanette just mentioned. Early, not really, I guess I didn't know what to look for. So it probably started a good, at least 8-9 years ago, but he wasn't diagnosed until 2020. So when it finally got to the point that he showed me, hit the back of his phone and phone number and zip code on the back of the phone because he couldn't remember anymore. So, and then he had sleep disturbance too, which again, I guess for me is you don't expect it. So you just kind of sit there and think it's just, oh, the forgetfulness or and maybe it's partly not wanting to know because that's so scary and what do you do? So once he was diagnosed, I think the other difficult thing was for me was to accept I didn't have any control. And for me, that's where all the whole slides, all that stuff that they talked about stress, I have them all, I think. So I'm a planner and I like to plan and control life. And this is like the most unplanned, unpredictable thing that can happen in somebody's life. So me figuring out how to handle that has really been a big, challenge for me. And that's caused everything else then to become a challenge. Things that I would have normally been able to handle then become now, because I'm stressed, I don't react in ways that I normally would.
Right.
And the
Right.
doctor, I will say too, I don't feel like the doctors, because I guess the disease is so difficult, so many of the doctors, like when they're diagnosed, they don't really dive into that end. And you look it up on the internet and you find all the physical things that are going to happen. So like I was all about planning for doors be wide enough for walkers and all this other physical things. And where I really was not prepared, the absolute most difficult thing was just watching the decline of the, mentally and losing my decision-making partner and then being teased on days when the Lewy bodies was good and he seemed normal. It's that you could get your hopes up and then
Right.
the next day you're back where you were. So the swing up and down, as Jeanette mentioned, it's very difficult.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so much that you can't control. You're absolutely right about that and how challenging that is to just ride that ride of back and forth and up and down. Thank you for that, Angie. I would love to ask Jeanette, actually, Jill, since we started with you, let me ask you the second question. And thank you again, Angie, for answering that. So you've all spoken to the challenges. I'd love to ask you, Jill, what have you done in the past or are you doing now, or maybe a little bit of both, that you found to be helpful or supportive with the challenges that you mentioned?
Okay. Well, first you have to really kind of recognize what you're going through. For me, it was the moment that I just went to work one day and just had a whole mental breakdown. I just started crying for no apparent reason. And I knew I was going through depression. And I kept saying, I know that I'm depressed, but I thought that I could kind of work my way through it and cycle myself through it. However, that particular day, I said I needed help. And it wasn't until I realized that I needed help that I joined the Elder Source weekly caregiver support group. And the group just allowed me to be honest about all of my emotions. And I think the first time that I heard myself say out loud, I was tired and I was angry that my mom was in this situation was like the biggest relief ever, because we often feel that when we're talking to our friends and our family, that sometimes we're being judged for saying that we're angry, we're tired, or they just don't really want to hear what we have to say. And then sometimes I feel, I felt that people were tired of me hearing me say the same things over and over and over again. And so I stopped telling people how I felt. But this group allowed me to really talk about things, to talk about real emotions, and hearing other people say, I'm tired too. Someone that could really understand what you're going through, that are walking in your shoes and to understand your situation was so key to my mental health. And so that's what I did for me, is join a caregivers group and just really talk to other people that were walking in my shoes and understood my situation.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that you allowed yourself to get that support. It's critical. It truly is. So for everyone listening, those are some wise words, that you were able to accept the help that was available to you, and that it really supported your mental health. I'm so glad. Jeanette, I'd love to ask the same question of you. What have you been doing, or what have you done in the past, or perhaps a little bit of both, that you found to be supportive or helpful?
Well, the first thing that I did when I went to my doctor and we talked about what was happening with Jim, he recommended the 36-hour day, the book. It's a small, thick paperback book that goes through all kinds of, like, every aspect that you're going to be facing. So I immediately joined a support group. At the time, I was doing some things at the senior center in Ponte Vedra, and they offered a support group. So early on, the first thing I did was to get there and cry and cry and cry. And then through the Council of Aging, Paulette offers a class, and it was a 3-part class, which was so helpful. She went through the stages of the disease. Jim has Alzheimer's, and the different things to expect, and helping me to change my mind for what to expect that was going to happen. And then after that, I found Elder Source, and I think I've done everything that Elder Source offers. I'm in Elder Source support group and Council of Aging support groups. 2 of them, I wouldn't give either of them up. I've done a couple of years ago, I think you offered a program called Savvy Caregiving, and I did that. And then I also did the Powerful Tools for Caregivers. Both of those were so helpful, just incredible. I also was a part of the T-Care program, received counseling, and again, that's where the support group is through. You cannot get enough knowledge and support. Just reaching out to anybody who will give you support and will give you education is just so important. It's knowledge helps you to feel confident about what's happening. Support groups allow you to see what's coming and allow you to speak your story so people who are joining can hear what's going on, because everybody's at a different point with their loved one. So anticipatory grief counseling is really helpful. I've done a lot of that as well. So
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm so glad that you've been able to reach out for support and that you found it to be so beneficial. And the Paulette that you're talking about, I assume, is Paulette Kozlowski,
yes,
who is
it
with the
is.
Council on Aging out of St. Johns County. And yeah, she's wonderful. And I'm so glad that you've been able to get support from her as well. I see that in the chat box, Andrea Spencer from Elder Source has placed the title and author of the 36-hour day book that you mentioned. Fantastic. And perhaps, Abigail, you can also put in a way for folks to take advantage of the groups that were mentioned, the T-Care and virtual support group. And I think there was one other, I can't remember which one that was.
Paulette's
Tools.
it's also emailed. Yeah.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeanette, for that.
Most
that
welcome.
was just so important to hear. And Angie, may I ask the same of you? What have you been doing, or what have you done, or a little bit of both, that you found to be supportive, helpful with the challenges that you faced?
Well, I guess the first couple of years I was in denial, but then after finally my husband had an episode and was delusional, and I mean I realized that I had to get help. And like Jeanette just mentioned, and Jill as well, I mean it's like it becomes this pivotal point where you have to do something. And I mean I also just broke down, started crying, and I went on the internet and started looking for support groups or something to help. I didn't know what it was. And, because again, I focused on the physical things, not really paying as much attention to the emotional and the mental side of things. So I reached out to the Mayo Clinic, and Candace there, who runs one of the support groups as well, and happened to answer the phone. And she listened to me talk and cry for over an hour. And I kept saying to her, I'm so sorry. I know you have work to do. And then I would cry some more. and she was so wonderful. I mean, she just kept saying, no, it's okay. You need this. And so she sent me lots of information on support groups, the different ones through the Mayo Clinic as well. And I wasn't a patient at the Mayo. Accepted with open arms anybody that, needs them. And so I started going to every single group meeting they had for all the dementias, and so especially the Lewy bodies one as well too, because that tended to be the delusions and the hallucinations were big with my husband. So the Mayo was great. And again, you share your journey, and it's a safe place where when you say, I feel angry sometimes because I was retiring with my husband who I love, and now I'm not doing it in the way I thought we were going to share wonderful times together. And you feel robbed for him and for yourself of that. And it does make you angry some days and sad some days. And, you just go through all these emotions that you have to deal with. So you have people to share that understand and don't judge there. They've been awesome. But the other thing for me that really helped, that a lot of know that everybody is aware of, is that I also look for an adult day program. Because my husband he got diagnosed officially right at the beginning of COVID. And so he was also very isolated, and I didn't even realize how much. So I found an adult day program, and they're awesome. So I would highly recommend that for people to try it. He started off going 3 or 2 days a week, and now he's at 3 days a week, but he fusses sometimes about having to go. But it's really the social part of it for him, and for me, the break that gives me the 3 days where I still work. I can work and he's safe, and keep my job down, as well as give him that outlet with other people. And they do things, they work with him, they do exercise, like they play beach ball stuff and try to keep them active and keep their minds engaged with games and different activities. So
Wonderful.
yeah, I can't say
Wonderful.
enough. And it gives you a community, another place where when you go in the door, they say, "Oh, good morning. Come have your coffee, Nick." You know, and I mean, he feels wanted and part
Wonderful.
of something.
So important to have a sense of connection and belonging for our mental well-being, both for us as caregivers and for our loved ones as well.
Well,
So
well, I'm sorry. I would even suggest that it has helped him as much as medication. That part of
absolutely.
it is so important.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you so much for sharing that. And for everything that's been mentioned, we're going to make sure that everyone listening has a way to connect with those speakers that we have through their email addresses and whatever contact information that they share that with you. Thank you for that, Angie. And we've got one last question I would like to ask to each of you, starting with you, Jill, which is, what one piece of advice would you offer to?
Well, it was really hard to just narrow it down to one thing. So I'm just going to throw my 4 out there.
Okay, you got it.
For the group. One is just realize when you're entering into burnout, to find time to take a moment to relax. The second one is to ask for help. Find you a support team or group that you can really talk to and share your thoughts and what you're going through in that moment. The third thing was, when you think that you need more resources, don't give up. Ask and talk to any professional that will listen, because you would be surprised that it would take just that one person to connect you with someone that could give you other resources that you didn't even know existed. And then lastly, we often get caught up in the bad aspect of being a caregiver, but don't forget to value the moment. Don't forget to value the time that you have with your loved one, because when they're gone, you cannot get that time back. So don't get so caught up in being a caregiver that you forget to value that time to laugh and to love and make memories with your loved one.
Oh, that's so important. Thank you, Jill.
And so those are my 4 pieces of advice that I would give to any caregiver.
That's just wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing. Jeanette, I will ask the same of you. What piece of advice or pieces of advice would you like to offer to those caregivers who are listening?
Well, like Jill, I'm smiling because there is not just one piece of advice, but, and I agree with everything that Jill has said. And you've heard over and over in this program, join a support group. And that was the first thing I did. I would encourage everybody, if you're not, get there. They're people of like minds. They understand. You don't have to explain your situation. It is so helpful. And then I would encourage everybody to learn as much as you can. Go on YouTube. There are programs. There's one I know that's called Care Blazers. And it's a woman presenting questions and situations and how to handle it. And I think as a new caregiver, that's probably one of your biggest concerns is, how do I handle it? What do I do? The other place to go to that I found so helpful was the Alzheimer's Association. They have a 24/7 phone number. They have people there all the time who will help you. They're very organized about how they help you, and they follow up with information. So use that in the middle of the night. If you're upset about something, use that resource. I guess I always say, build a village. Go to your set up doctors of different kinds, family, of course, friends, neighbors, different, as we know, Council of Aging, Elder Source, Alzheimer's Society, your church, day programs. I have Jim at a day program as well, and it's fabulous. And then the other thing that I started was what we call the Clamp It Hour. And it's Friday at 5 o'clock at our house. I put the garage door up and I put folding chairs out, and neighbors come with, the only rule is come as you are. It's casual. Bring what you want to drink. I put out snacks, and
Love it.
yeah, it's a way of socialization for Jim and mostly for me,
That
because
is fantastic.
yeah, it keeps him involved in socialization. If he's tired, he can go to bed and I can still monitor him with the cameras that I have. Neighbors get a chance to get together and to see him. And for me, it's a chance to widen that village in our neighborhood. So
that is just lovely. I am
yeah,
so glad that you shared that. What a fantastic
yeah,
idea. I love that you call it the Clampett hour for
the
Beverly Hillbillies. Oh,
in the driveway and folding chairs
near
and
the cement pond. That's
yeah.
wonderful.
And
Wonderful.
the last thing, one other thing that I would add is to practice gratitude. Everything is so challenging and so difficult. It sometimes is hard to see the positive, and we need to stay positive. So be kind to yourself, nurture yourself, see the gratitude and the positive. And lastly, have humor. Everything is so difficult. As people who know me, know that I make lots of jokes about horrible, horrific situations. And I say all the time, if I didn't lighten it up, I would be drawn down. I'd be in the fetal position in the bottom of my pool. So take care of yourself. That's most important.
Wonderful, wonderful advice. So important on every level. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you to each of the caregivers, to Jill, to Jeanette, to Angie. Angie, I didn't even get to you yet. Excuse me. I almost skipped you by accident. One more question for you, Angie, the same one. What piece of advice or pieces of advice would you like to share with the caregivers who are listening?
Yeah, and I think it's the same theme you can see through all of us in different ways. Again, I'd say the same thing, that be careful of isolation, because it sneaks up on you. You all of a sudden, on you and your, the person you're caring for, you become so isolated. So, definitely staying interactive with the community in whatever way, brings you comfort and joy is important. Then also, your only purpose can't be caretaking. You've got to have something else. If you don't, I just don't know how long you can survive it. You need a purpose besides being the perfect caretaker. And then
so important.
Yeah. And then the last thing really is just, again, education and planning are still needed, because at one point I felt like I give up. And I actually had to tell myself, I felt like I was dying, just a slow death. And I had to say, no, I choose to live, which means I have to plan for a future. I have to plan for good things, because I want a life and I choose to have one.
Fantastic. So important. Angie, thank you for sharing that important advice. Thank you to each of you caregivers for not only doing what you do as caregivers, but for being with us today and for sharing this important information. I obviously would want you to stick around, because we're going to open it up to the Q&A for each of our speakers, including our caregiver panelists. And if you could go to the next slide. There you go. Perfect. So I would like to read some of the questions that were submitted. If each of the, if you haven't already, panelists, make sure that your camera is on. Okay, excellent. Jill, I think you've got to put your camera on, and then Angie, you as well. Okay, so let's see here. Among the questions that were answered, I'm just going to go back to the very beginning. And I believe this one was answered by you, Abigail, but are the online sessions that are offered for your programs with ElderSource for caregivers in Florida?
Yes, so is this question in regard to powerful tools, or did it not say?
Let's see. didn't say, but it's just simply said are the online
Okay.
courses that are offered only for those available in Florida, living in Florida.
Okay, so I can answer for both. When it comes to the support group, you can be located anywhere. We've had people join from Philadelphia, Miami, different places like that. So you can live anywhere for the support group. But for the class, the Powerful Tools, you do need to be located in the Northeast Florida area, or your care receiver needs to be in that area. But I think actually, yes. So as long as you or the caregiver live in one of the 7 counties in Northeast Florida, you can do the Powerful Tools. But for support group, you can be anywhere.
Okay, wonderful. And can you make sure that our listeners know how to access the programs that you mentioned under Elder Source?
Yes. So in the chat, I sent everyone my email. So you can send me an email. I'll put it in the chat again.
Well,
And-
not everybody listening will be live in the chat. So,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah.
Okay.
So if you could let us know, if you can,
Yeah.
a way that they can reach you.
So the best way to reach me is definitely by email, and that would be caregiver support. So caregiver support, all one word, at myeldersource.org. And I'm usually pretty quick to get back to the emails. So I would send an email to me there. Let me know what you're interested in. And usually I'll introduce myself over the phone. We'll set up a time to talk. And if you're just interested in the support group, I will then add you to a list and you get a reminder every Tuesday with the Zoom link. So I can send you the Zoom information. So you'll have it for tomorrow and Thursday, but then every Tuesday you'll be getting an email. Then for Powerful Tools, I'll send you a link to register for future classes. So definitely
Perfect.
reach out to that email.
And to reiterate, these are all at no cost.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And we had one additional question for you, Abigail, which was that would the book be mailed or could it be downloaded?
So it can be either. So if you prefer to have the actual book, we can definitely mail it to you. If you prefer just to download, you can do that as well. We can send it to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see some of these other questions. Okay. I believe that this is while you were speaking, Sashenda. My husband has frequent delusions. Can you give us some ways to handle them? So far, his have not been aggressive in any way.
Okay, excuse me. I think some of the ways to handle delusions is first and foremost not to take offense to what they're saying, what they're seeing, because they might not, of course, they're not in their right mind at that moment. They're not that person that you're used to, you're familiar with. Some tips in how to manage when your loved one is suffering from delusion is switching the focus to another activity. Maybe just getting them distracted and offering a different activity to do, maybe going for a walk, or maybe they're really persistent on what they saw or what they're saying. Then give them a simple answer, just give them a simple answer and then go on about your day. Angie, you mentioned earlier that, your husband was suffering from delusions and hallucinations. Can I call on you to provide some of your strategies on how you managed his delusions?
Well, distraction is a good one if you can get them, but a lot of times when they get, at least with Louis' bodies especially, they get so focused, it's very difficult to get them, distracted. So some of that, but I've used a lot of, I explained to him, I say a dream. And because if you tell them it's not true, it is true to them. That is what they're seeing to them. So he would get very combative, although not aggressive, but more combative of not believing me. Like he didn't trust that I was telling the truth because to him, he saw and believed what he saw. So the dreaming thing did stop him. And then he would try to think, and he was more accepting, and then that would kind of diffuse the situation some that way. Because I mean, we had birds flying around our house, black cats, which I think animals are very common. The delusions also, affairs, think he, thought I was having an affair, those kinds of things. But yeah, for me, distraction. And then again, trying to calmly, because that's the other thing I learned is he picked up, as he would get more anxious, I would get more anxious. That would make him worse, because they do feel what you feel. And so I had to learn to take a deep breath and just try to be calm and explain it in a way that made sense to him, not necessarily the medical things.
Yeah, resisting that urge to argue back with them that's not true. So you want to validate what they're seeing, even though it's not true, but you don't want to escalate it. Our purpose is to de-escalate that situation.
And the hallucinations during the night, like he would hear things that, he weren't there. So then if I said they weren't there, he didn't believe me. But if I said, we have cameras, and I would say motion detection, they would have said to us, there was motion. There is no motion because the cameras say so. And again, that helped him understand that even though what he was dreaming or seeing or hallucinating, it wasn't, he could accept the fact that if the cameras weren't saying it was true, then he might be dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Thank you so much for that. Wonderful. I want to just going through the chat list. I see that the book that was mentioned, I just want to share for those of you who are listening to this later as a recording. The book is called The 36-Hour Day, A Family Guide to Caring for People Who Have Alzheimer's Disease, Related Dementias, and Memory Loss. It's by Peter Rabins and Nancy Mace. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have here? I know, Soshenda, I can't find it here, but it was in there. A question was asked. You had said that one of the factors of contributing to stress is education level, and someone asked exactly how that's related, if you could elaborate upon that.
And I can. I went and found some information to provide. So in the study that was done, caregivers had lower levels of caregiver burden and higher quality of life due to their high school and higher education level. And this made researchers think that based on the information that they were, with higher education and high school education, they were able to use education and training channels more efficiently and effectively in order to do a better job in caregiving. So therefore they experienced less caregiving burden. So I guess what they're trying to say in that way is you are able to utilize resources better, or know where to go to look for those resources and services. And that way it helped to eliminate that caregiver stress and, of course, burnout.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. And if you could both say and then place into the chat a way for those who are listening or listening to this as a recording to reach out to the Mayo program that you have there, to you if they have any questions, how would you like them to do so?
Yes, so I have a contact. I sent you the contact. Are you going to show the list?
I will.
A phone number. I know it off the top of my head for those who would like to jot it down now. It's 904-953-6523. And please leave us a detailed message on what you're looking for in terms of resources or services. And someone from our staff will return your call within 24 hours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Soshenda. Let's see here. Okay. Everyone who is listening will receive these resources as well as the slide deck. It will also be posted in our upcoming newsletter and on our Caregiver Coalition website. Oh, we've got a nice comment about the caregiver panelists, 3 amazing women. Thank you so much. You have given me a new perspective and hope. That was from Jean Key. Thank you so much for that sweet comment. Alyssa writes, do you have any caregiver resources for Spanish speaking caregivers? I know that we do.
We are in the
Yes.
process of developing some as well at our center.
Wonderful. So Alyssa, I'll put my information. I can always email you some Spanish brochures that we have at Elder Source, and I can email that to you. If you want to put your, I'll put mine into the chat, and then I'll reach out to you and I can send that. Let's see here.
And on the topic of resources, since you're on that, Rachel,
Mhm.
just to let the audience know, Rachel will be sending out one of our handouts called the 15 Healthy Brain Tips. So we're talking about self-care. So it doesn't mean it doesn't only apply to those with a memory problem. It's also to not have a form of memory problem. So some of those tips are eating a Mediterranean diet, so healthy fats and nuts, keeping up with exercise, keeping up with your dental hygiene. So those are the 15 tips based on the studies that have been done at Mayo Clinic in our center that we found to be very helpful to, brain health.
Wonderful. Okay, I am putting my contact information, which is rachel.weinstein at myeldersource.org, into the chat box. It's RACHEL.WEINSTEIN at myeldersource.org. That's in the chat now. Jess, if you could kindly go to the next slide, that would be helpful. So some information for everyone who's listening and watching today. The Elder Source Helpline, that's where you start for all kinds of support and connection to resources in the community, is 888-242-4464. The Elder Source website is myeldersource.org. And the Caregiver Coalition website is caregivercoalition.org.
Rachel, we had one last question from Rick.
Sure. Okay.
He says, can we discuss the drawbacks versus the benefits of square versus rectangular breathing? I think that's a Shunda question.
I did see that question, and I don't think there is a big difference between square or rectangular breathing. I think very minor, because it's probably where you're breathing in longer for the rectangular, because with square breathing, you're doing it for 4 seconds each, breathing in for 4, breathing out for 4. Whereas rectangular, it's probably going to be like maybe 8 seconds versus 4. So that I would only concede would be the difference between square and rectangular breathing, but the benefits are the same. Either way, you're getting your heart rate down and you're breathing more leveled. So both are beneficial. I don't think that one is better than the other. I think that maybe square is more utilized because it's a shorter period of seconds where you don't have to hold in your breath for much longer, because as you can see, it was difficult for me to talk and then also try to breathe in and out at the same time. So I think that's the only difference between square and rectangular.
Wonderful. Okay, let's see. A couple of other questions I see here. Ted asks, what type of respite is offered? I'm not sure if you mean in general in the community, but we also have another question that's similar nature that says, can you give the names of the Jack's adult daycare centers? There's so many of them. Who would like to answer those questions related to respite?
I'll answer for Jim. I have Jim going to Almost Home Daybreak, and that's in Mandarin. And they're open 7 in the morning until 6 at night, Monday through Friday. They serve breakfast, snack, lunch, and a snack.
Wonderful. You can also, I know you can reach out to Elder Sources Helpline at 888-242-4464, and we could help to connect you based upon where you would like that resource to be, in what community.
I could add that my husband attends River Garden, and that's off Old St. Augustine, and they open, I think it's 7:30, and they're open till 5, and I can't say enough good things about them there.
Wonderful. I have lots of information from a previous workshop that we did on respite care with contact information. If you would, anyone listening would like that specific information, you can also email me and I will respond with some more specifics. It's rachel.weinstein@myeldersource.org. I put it in the chat. And do we have anybody else here who's asked a question?
And Rachel, I'll add one other thing. I actually use Elder Source for my respite care, and also the city of Jacksonville provides services as well. So I can't say to the group more than on one occasion is to just basically ask questions, and you'll easily find resources, but you have to stay persistent with your questions and just trying to find the help that you need. Just don't give up trying to find things. It took me almost 2 years just to have all of the care that my mom actually needed, and to provide me with resources.
Wonderful. Fantastic. A couple of answers in the chat from Paulette Kozlowski, who is joining us as an attendee today from St. Johns County Council on Aging, the Sunshine Center. That information is in the chat box, but for those listening to the recording, it's 904-209-3690. The question asked is River Garden a daycare program? It's both. So River Garden has a adult day program. They also have other kinds of senior living as well. And the city of Jacksonville respite that was just mentioned by Jill, the link to that is in the chat box. Okay. All right, I think that would be that. Everybody who's listening, thank you very much for your active participation. And of course, to our speakers and to those behind the scenes, thank you so very much for making this a wonderful program. I appreciate each and every one of your specialties. The information that you shared was so relevant, so important. Everyone listening will be able to receive these materials that were discussed, the slide deck, the handout, the recording will be posted to our website and through a newsletter. So lots of different ways to take advantage of learning. And I'm so appreciative to each and every one of you today. If you're listening, please don't forget, after you click off, there's going to be a really quick survey, literally just a matter of a minute to fill out. If you could kindly do that, that will help us get better and bring you the topics that you'd most like to hear about. Thank you, everyone. Any final questions or comments before we go? You're welcome, Sabrina. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys, so much. You were so valuable. Have a great rest of your. Hey, Jill, thank you again. Super valuable. Look for the follow-up stuff. Oh, you're on mute, Jill.
I was going to say thank you. This was a great opportunity. So thank you for that. And
I'm going to tell Rachel, I really think that when we can and where it's appropriate to bring in some folks who are walking the walk of whatever topic that I just think that it adds so much value. Things that we can't say because I'm not a caregiver. So I think what you had to say was truly valuable. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Right. Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.